Hey everybody, Tyler with Meeple Mountain here, bringing you another board game review, this time from our great local friends here in Nashville, iv.studios. They have given us a copy of Realm of Reckoning to review, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, this might be, or is tied for, my favorite game that they've put out so far, and you guys know that they've put out a ton of amazing games. This is a variable scoring game where you and your table will determine, honestly, what type of game you're playing, whether it's area control, set collection, or some combo in between, resource gathering. All of it is determined by the table, the choices that you make, and which items you allow to score. 9 unique things will score throughout a game of Realm of Reckoning, and that is not all that are available at the table. There are far more, but you get to determine exactly which ones score at the end of the game and throughout the game. And the strategy and the way that you execute what scores win determines if you will come out on top or on the bottom in Realm of Reckoning. So, with all that said, let's get to the table and check out this incredibly unique card drafting game where you determine what scores. Welcome to Realm of Reckoning, a drafting game at its core, card drafting game where you and your opponents will select cards as you draft through your hands over 3 ages on this map and terrain. Throughout the game, you will determine which items out of many variable scoring conditions will score during and at the end of the game. You are, of course, seeking victory points throughout this. At the end of 3 ages, whoever has the most victory points will be crowned the ruler of the realm. Now, there's a lot of work and there's a lot of interesting components to this game, so let's do just a really high-level overview. And then don't worry, we'll zoom in and look at these intricate pieces and talk about exactly what you're doing. Now, at its core, Realm of Reckoning is a card drafting game. You are going to have a hand of cards. Out of those hands of cards, every player is going to have a set. You are going to look at, choose, and play one of those cards and then pass clockwise on the first round, counterclockwise on the second, clockwise again at the third round. And you'll go through this until you've played out your hand of cards. Each card is going to give you an immediate bonus when you play. You're going to gain something. So as you take turns around the table, you're going to be drafting cards, getting bonuses, doing things, altering the board state. When you play a card, you're going to make a choice. You're going to say, do I want to tuck this card in at the top value, so one of the 3 suits at the top, or one of the 2 at the bottom of my player board? And we'll look at that in more detail in a minute. Tucking these in various locations does 2 things for you, potentially, maybe even more. It is going to gain you influence on the board with these particular tracks. Every color, you can see there's 5 here. There's orange, yellow, we'll call it turquoise, pink, and blue. Each of those have an influence track. You'll gain influence. Influence can be used for a lot of things. You can also, conversely, gain symbols on these things. These symbols are worth different things depending on what is scoring in the game. They may be valuable, they may be valueless. And so you're going to make some calculated choices. Do I want what's on my card? Or do I want, where this card is going to slot for the value that it will add throughout the game for me? Or is it a combo of both? And how do you make those choices and prioritize those things? And we're going to take a look at the cards in detail and talk about them in just a little bit. But you're going to take your turns drafting those over 3 ages. On the board, you're going to be doing several different things. So again, I mentioned there's influence tracks. These go up to 8 on each of these things. When you get to these tracks and get to 3 or more, and if you have the most on that particular track of that color, you will gain an artifact on there on the far right-hand side of your screen. Artifacts boost and empower various actions that you take. And as long as you have the most of influence on that particular track, you will maintain that artifact. Someone can always steal it from you, and ties are not friendly, so you could lose that artifact. So that's one of the things that influence can do for you. You can also send out your worshippers or cultists to add power to a region. They also may score you points at the end of the game for area control elements. There are these advisors at the top. These act as free votes, and we'll talk about them in a little bit for voting, and they also can be spent for additional voting points. What else can we do? We can claim mercenary cards, those little cards on the top right area of your screen. They can also be used for votes in the voting phase. So once you've played your cards and you've set up and you've went through the round, we're then going to have a reckoning. In your hand of cards, there are reckonings that will come into play throughout the course of that round, and there's also a final reckoning that we know exactly where that is happening, and that is the Stone Garden. So every round there will be 3 reckonings as determined by these cards. Every card has unique rewards that it will be be giving you for first, second, and third place in the setup that we have here for 4 players. There will be, of course, for 3 players, there will be more rewards for higher player counts. The first place reward is always amazing. It's usually a lot of victory points or, most importantly, monuments. I keep mentioning how we do variable scoring. These monuments will allow you to determine and lock in across the board what items score victory points at the end of each round that there is still left in the game and, of course, at the end of the game. So as you win reckonings, you will get to have a say over what scores. Now, there's some interesting tactics here. Do you want to let others win and kind of try to float off of what they do, or do you want to have a say on your own unique strategy and what you're scoring throughout the game? So the way that we win these reckonings is through voting, bidding. We are going to secretly bid. So let's say there's that reckoning in the yellow region. You're going to bid things that are applicable in that region, which can be cultists, little troops that you have in that region. They count as a vote. Again, advisors of that color can count as a vote. Whatever monuments are in here determine what can be used for voting. So if we had, like, for instance, this turquoise guy over here got moved over here, your advisors could also count as votes for that. Also, you'll get to spend essence influence in that region. So if you're, again, playing in a yellow region, you will get to use your influence. You could move down on that track to use it as votes. You can also use money. Of course, we love to use money to buy votes. You can use all of these various things and mercenary cards to influence and tally your vote. Everyone will choose a number secretly, 3, 2, 1, reveal. Whoever has the highest amount can choose which reward they want to take, and that's a very important distinction because you don't have to take the first place thing, but if you do, you lose all of the things that you voted. You have to spend all your money, do all those things, kind of lose all your troops, whatever it is that got you to your voting point to then gain the reward. Same with, in this case, second place, which is usually nice, but you would have to pay whatever you vote for. But if you take the third option, the worst option, it is always a negative thing. Negative points, losing cards, losing troops, something, but you don't have to pay anything. You get all of the things that you voted, to stay on the board. And so there can be some tactics there as well. If you didn't get first place and you don't want second place, you can choose to just take the bad option to keep your stuff to vote stronger and better another day. So there's some really interesting tactics in this game, but at its core, you're going to be drafting cards, you're going to be voting on and trying to bid secretly to win these reckonings that are happening around the board, repositioning your gear, your influence, your power to most benefit you, and hopefully choosing monuments that score you points based on how you're doing in the game. That's a lot of moving parts. The game itself is honestly quite simple, but we're going to break it down into some bite-sized chunks. So first, let's talk about a player board, what you can kind of expect to see, because the player boards are slightly asymmetric, and then we'll take a look at the cards that you will be drafting. We'll talk about what they do, the resources they provide. Then we'll look at the big board here and talk about what you're seeing on this board. Shout out here, this is a prototype edition, so this board is going to be crisper, clearer, have better lines, all those types of things. But we'll talk about each of the areas, what they score, what they do, what you can expect to find in a full game of Realm of Reckoning. Here we have just a look at your starting kind of player setup for a particular player. Now, I mentioned that every faction is slightly asymmetric, and it is very slight. But as you can see here, you're going to have some starting influence in various sections. So this particular, the gray player, the Watchers here, they are going to have 1 turquoise influence at the start of the game and 2 blue influence at the start of the game. Now, again, you can gain influence anywhere you go. This is just a slight starting point that kind of nudges you in a certain direction. Conversely, these locations here, these little pips, tell you where your little cultists start. So they get 1 in turquoise and 1 in blue. And you can already probably get a feel that these guys are a little bit leaning you to say, hey, you're going to be the turquoise and blue dudes, right? Like those are going to be areas that you're interested in. Conversely, on this side, you're going to see that they start with 1 watcher, or excuse me, 1 little advisor here for blue. So they're going to get 1 of these guys. Remember, they are a free permanent vote whenever you're doing a blue vote. You can also burn them, get rid of them for 3 votes if you choose to or need to. They also start with 2 mercenary cards. This is an example of a mercenary card. On them, they just have 2 symbols. Very simple. They're split in 2. If you're fighting in a region that meets one of the 2 requirements, they are worth a point. Simple enough. You can also, if they match both, count them as 2 votes. So they can just be variable votes depending if you match the colors. And you may say, well, how do we get multiple votes in the same region? Those little pillars that we mentioned before, and I'll kind of show them here, there are 2 of them each. And so they can actually and will move around the board as you have reckonings. When you start reckonings, you can start moving some of these around and choose one to add into a particular region. region. You never need one in a region at all to have a vote. So even if there were no yellow pillars in the yellow region, and you were fighting in the yellow region, you can still use yellow resources, yellow influence, things like that. But you can move them around to help with like mercenary cards and things like that. So here's their cultists. They start with a little set of these guys that you can add to the board as well. I added these cards. Everybody gets one as a player aid. I just added one here so you can see both sides of this. But it's going to walk you through the things that you can vote with, and it's going to tell you how much those things are worth. And so you can kind of read through that as we go through it. But as I mentioned before, this is in essence a card drafting game with some really awesome variable scoring opportunities. So of course, to understand that, we need to understand our cards. So I'm going to showcase just some example cards that I've pulled out, and you can kind of take a look at them. And you'll notice some of them, of course, are at the 4+ player count mark. That's okay for illustration purposes, right? So this is an example of some cards that you would see in a game of Realm of Reckoning. And they reference and showcase all kinds of various types of things that you can find in the game. And these are kind of what you can expect to see as you draft through your hand. And there's a few special ones that we'll also kind of showcase and look at as we go. So when you're looking at these, you have cultists that you can gain. So when you get this, you get to place dudes on the map. Pretty simple, kind of pseudo area control stuff. Remember, they can be used as votes, but they can also be points if certain things are scoring. And that's one thing to keep in mind, is almost everything that you're collecting and doing and using can be worth points if the game kind of lends itself that way. So that's these dudes. You'd gain 3 guys. You can divvy them up as you need to go. If you run out of dudes, you can then pull dudes off of one area of the map and put them somewhere else. Here is money. You kind of referenced it quickly on that first call, but money is money. It's coins. You get to keep coins. Coins work as votes. You can spend them as votes. 1 coin is your first vote. If you want to spend another vote with coins, you have to spend 2, and then 3, and so on. So the more votes you want to spend with coins, they become less valuable, but it's always nice to have some coins to throw in a quick, easy vote. Coins, of course, yes, can also be victory points depending on what is scored. Next, we have mercenary cards. You see we have some here. That would give you 2 more of them. Of course, having more options on that can be very valuable. It is a little luck-based, but it's still very nice. Here we have an advisor. You get to take an advisor of your choice. And now there is an advisor of every color available. There are 5 colors, so there are lots of different advisors. You could choose to diversify. You could choose to have more than one, as there are 5 advisors of each color. So you could have, say blue here. We had all 5 blue advisors. We have 5 free votes every time something happens in blue, and you just kind of almost lock an area down in that way and say, I just have so much free influence here. So I really enjoy advisors, and again, set collecting advisors can be worth points, and we'll look at that in just a little bit. The last kind of card, now I guess let's zoom out for a second. On these cards, that's the immediate effect. When you play it, you get that thing, and as I mentioned, once you play it, you have to then tuck the card somewhere to gain the reward, and you'll notice there are lots of options here. You have on the bottom, you have your yellow and your orange sections at the bottom, and then you have turquoise, pink, and blue all at the top. And you're going to have to make a choice on every card that you play on whether you want the bottom benefit or the top benefit. So looking at this guy here, this advisor card, if I tucked it at the top in pink, I would slot it in. He would slide in under here. I would gain a pink influence because that's shown here, and I would gain this pink reward here, which is something that you would collect depending on what's scoreable, where I am competing with my neighbors left and right of me to have more of them. And if I have more than a neighbor, I get 6 points and they would lose 2 points. If I had more than both neighbors, I would gain 12 points, they would lose 4 points. So it's very nice. This is a fun one. I like it. It's a little mean, right? On this side here, you have orange. You would get an influence in orange, and you are set collecting sets of things. And so you would want to have, this, we'll call it an ingot, a steel plate. There are 5 total items that you would want to collect, and you want to have more of them, and the more you have, the more points you score. If you have none of them, you actually lose a bunch of points, so that could be valuable too, and I would take it and I would slot it in the orange section, and the same kind of thing. Yellow here, you can see there's different amounts of influence you could gain. There's also money bags. Money bags, you're doing collection of having the most and having the least, and there's points potentially to be had there. And there's lots of options. There's some for blue, there's some for turquoise, all of them giving you those options, and so you're kind of torn in this interesting choice of what do I want to gain immediately that's variable, that gives me some flexibility on the board, but also what do I need to have for scoring and for the agenda that I'm working towards. And so there's some really interesting choices on these very relatively simple cards. The last thing we'll talk about, buried and hidden within these cards, it's seated within the deck in any game of Realm of Reckoning, are more Reckoning events. Now, we know where each final Reckoning every round is going to happen. There's going to be 3 Reckonings every round, so 9 things will score in any given game of Realm of Reckoning. But hidden in the deck, looking very similar to other cards, are more Reckoning cards that can come in, and there's a set number for each color that will be in there, and there may be some choices that you'll have here. And you may see these cards coming through. And you could play this to just say, we are going to do a Reckoning right now in turquoise or in pink or whatever that place is. When you do that, you're going to look through the available scoring cards like this one here. You're going to select one. Say I select this one. And I might say this is the event that we're scoring for, so people know what they're competing for. And if you get first place or get first choice, you could get a monument or 10 points. And those are actually both some really cool options. If you get last place or choose last place, you're actually going to lose 3 points. So this could be conceived as a very valuable thing that you're scoring for. Now, the really important thing to know here is that when you get the Reckoning card, if you get this card, when you play it, you're going to get these fire or wild symbols, and those are very valuable. They can be whatever you need them to be. So that can be great for any of the set collection work that you're doing around the table. These will let you make them what you need them to be, which can really rack you up some points. So playing these can be tactical for determining when you want a Reckoning to happen and what you want to score there if it's advantageous to you, but also you may want to play it just for the wild symbols depending on how things are going. So that is kind of how the Reckonings work. The last card, because there's 3 cards around like this, the last card automatically becomes that final Reckoning, and that is where kind of everyone knows something has been going on for the whole round, and is hopefully gearing up and prepping for that event as well, because the person who wins first on that one gets that final Reckoning card, which is 3 of these wild symbols, which is also huge. Along with all the other benefits that come with winning a Reckoning, you get these symbols that give you a lot of push and sway. Moving right along, we're going to look at the artifacts that you can gain. Now, you remember I mentioned these artifacts can be gained by having the most influence in a region. That's that little 0 to 8 track on each section of the board. You can't have ties, and if you're at 8 and someone else is at 8, you still would lose this artifact. You need to have the most influence. But remember, people are going to be spending influence as bidding and voting power, so that really moves and treads along, again, depending on your particular table group. But these are what you could be competing a lot for in the course of the game. Interestingly, when we played this, everybody kind of had 1 or 2 that they locked into, and because we played 4-player, and that was it. They kind of stayed for almost the whole game. But these can be really swingy and are super powerful, especially depending on which faction you're kind of gunning for and playing with. So let's just run through them right to left. Over here, it says when gaining mercenary cards, you get 2 more. Now, that doesn't mean each card you get 2 more cards, but if I gain 2 cards normally, I would gain 4. That is huge. That gives you a lot of options and a lot of cards really quickly. The turquoise one I love because it says when you're gaining advisors, you gain influence in that color. So, as I mentioned, I really like the advisors. I love the idea of free votes and building up your engine, so to speak. This gives you influence in that region as well, which of course is more voting power, which is great. But this can also help shore up which things you're keeping or trying to get as far as artifacts go. It's very, very, very valuable. This says when gaining coins, gain 2 more. If you're kind of playing what we call the money bags gameplay style, that can be really helpful, and it combos with orange. We'll talk about orange in a second. Pink is, again, kind of the same. When you're placing troops, you place +2 troops, so it's just a way to get more troops out on the board. And then finally, orange is definitely the most unique of these, and it's you choose one before each reckoning. Remember, there's 3 reckonings per round, there's 3 rounds, so this would be 9 times this happens, and you get to pick, do I want a troop, do I want a coin, or do I want a mercenary card? And you might say, well, that's kind of weak, isn't it, Tyler? Well, kind of, but remember, if you have this and any of these items here, so blue, yellow, or pink, you then can have 3 things. So if I was like, before reckoning, I choose to add a troop in that region, I also have pink, I place 3 troops. That's huge. That's a big swing of things for free that you did nothing. There are literal cards that let you get less troops out than 3 troops. So that's just a really nice bonus to have, and that one I think is really fought over. This is by far the most interesting kind of linchpinny one that you can combo with another artifact. So that is how they work, and you'll be fighting over those as you go throughout a game. All right, let's take a look at the main board and talk about the real meat and potatoes of the game, which is what are all of these scoring options you keep talking about, Tyler? So on the board here, you have 5 regions. You have the 2 northern regions here, which is pink and blue, and you have the 3 southern regions, which is turquoise, yellow, and orange. And why I mention that is because, as I mentioned, this game can be area control based, which is if this section here or this section here have a relic placed on them, one of these kind of Statue of Liberty looking little monuments here, if that is placed on them, a monument, they will score, and each section would score you 8 points if you have your cultist majority in that section. So at the end of the game, if I had these two cultists here and no one had anything else or had less than 2, I would gain 8 points. Same for blue. You know, if I was down here, it'd be for each of these 3 bottoms. So if these 2 sections have monuments on them, this would be an area control game where we're doing a lot of area control, you know, scoring and work. But these might never be scored, in which case there would be no area control in this game at all. And that's a super interesting component of this game. And I mentioned kind of a little bit about how these guys work, but just to talk about it again, these monument pieces, these little towers, can move to other regions. When there's a reckoning, if you set off a reckoning, you get to determine, let's say I want to do it in turquoise. I get to pick another monument that I can move into that region. It could be orange, whatever's advantageous for me. So if I had a lot of troops, or excuse me, if I had a lot of influence potentially in orange, I might want to add an orange thing so I could use my advisors, I could use my essence, my influence to vote more heavily here and have more options to swing more points that way. So that's kind of how those work and move around. But again, around this board, we have lots of scoring options. So let's just move through them. I already mentioned area control. But let's just go kind of around here. So this right here, if I scored this, that is going to score points based on the influence track of pink, as shown here. If you were at the bottom here, you would lose 2 points. Anywhere in this middle section shown here would be 3, and then 8 here. Now, there is one of these for each of these sections. I'll just touch on them briefly to denote where they are, but each of these essence tracks, influence tracks, excuse me, can score points. If they all were set, this would be a very different game than an area control game, for instance, where you're just bidding to have the most influence that you can on all of these various tracks. Over here, we have a set collection for those advisors. You can only pick one of these, so whatever you pick is locked in for the whole game. There's 2 options that you can pick. Now remember, there's 5 colors of advisors, so if you chose the top one, it would be every set of turquoise and pink advisor that you have, those kind of tall, staunch men, like for instance, these guys right here. That would be 5 points. The bottom set would be every set of blue, yellow, and oranges worth 8 points. And again, whatever you pick, the other cannot be selected for the whole game, so you couldn't have both and be just collecting a ton. So you can, you know, kind of do some interesting things there, trying to maybe snipe away what you see someone else is prepping for if they had a lot of a particular set type of these advisors. Those can be a lot of points. This is the one I referenced earlier that I love, which is if you go here, you are scoring those pink eye flame symbols on your cards in your tableau. So if you put a lot of these pinks in here, this might be one you want to score because you're comparing with your neighbors on your left and your right. If you have more pink than a neighbor, you gain 6, they lose 2. Same on both sides. So this can be a 12-point swing every round. I really enjoyed this because it's 12 for you. It's even more than that because then it's -2 for each of your neighbors. So it's a huge point generating piece. I love this guy. All right, over here for turquoise, its unique scoring element is that you can do set collection. And there's 2 symbols that you can be putting into your tableau for turquoise. They're these little scrolls and these keys, and it's scrolls multiplied by keys. So you're trying to kind of have some interesting math there on what you collect. How many do you get? What's the multiplication table? And you want those to probably be even to get the maximum score that you can, but you can make a lot of points on this particular one. Again, we have here, we can score this influence track right here for turquoise. Again, this is the area control for the southern 3 sections, scoring 8 points for each section there, where you have the most cultists. Under yellow, or the equality section, it is the money bags area. So here, if you have the most money bag symbols in your yellow tableau, you get 10 points. Whoever has the least at the table loses 5. So again, you can kind of get a feel for pink and yellow here are a little bit more of that gain points, lose points, mean element of the game, right? Here is where we score the yellow influence track. And finally, this is a fun one here. Whoever has the most coins gets 12 points. So again, coins being the yellow currency, you can probably see some synergistic things here with playing a lot of yellow cards to get a lot of money bag symbols, to get a lot of coins, to maybe get that yellow influence up, to get the yellow artifact, to make more coins. There's some fun combos you can do here. Up here, this is Orange's unique section, or Dominion. Dominion. So here you have... I can't read, it's domination, goodness. So here you have the Shattered Ward, where you will be collecting symbols on your orange cards in your tableau. You'll notice if you have none of those, you get -6. 1, you get -1, and then so on and so forth. If you have all of these items, you're getting 16 whopping points, which is a very nice drop of points in the game. So this can be fun set collection as well, or even a mean take that to someone else if they do not have orange cards in their tableau early on or later in the game. This is what we call the loser bracket. I've played this one, so trust me, there's no shame in the loser game, and I won. So you just have to play to your strengths. So this can be a massive catch-up mechanic for someone if they're behind. So if you are not ahead in points, as I was not as purple, starting just a little bit behind my compatriots in the game, you can play this little guy here, and whatever round you're in, at the end of the round, you will score some points. And it happens early in scoring, so you can actually gain these and get ahead in points and then still make points. So this is a very nice little bump for you. You gain 5, 10, and then 15 massive points in the last round if you're behind. And so the trick here was to be right behind your opponents and be in least points in the game, but then be able to rocket ahead from this massive kind of infusion of points. So again, here is Dominion's influence track, where you can just move up and again score points in the same way of -2, 3, and 8. This one is really fun too. This is a super unique one. This is 8 points per card in your smallest stack, and what that means is you have 5 stacks, 5 sections on your tableau, and if you were playing this one, you would want to have those equally built out, because whichever one is the least amount of cards, you get 8 points per card. So for me, this was not good because I had a very massive stack of pink because I was trying to really run this one home, but I did not have a lot of yellow, so it wouldn't have worked well for me. But if you had, say, 4 in each of your sections uniquely, this can be a massive amount of points. So this one's one you want to probably be building for and planning on early, and you probably have to sacrifice some immediate gains for long-term gains, but if you can make sure you get this guy in play, this can be massive points for you. Over here is blue. It's another choice, kind of like pink over here, where you can only pick one of these items, and whatever you lock in excludes the other. But on your blue cards in your tableau, they're going to have eyes closed or eyes open, and whatever you have, if you chose eyes open, for instance, you get 3 points times the number of those chosen. So if I had 3 open eyes in my tableau times 3, I would be getting 9 points. So you can see there's a lot of explosive point potential there as well, depending on what you select. Finally, over here, you're going to be getting 2 points per mercenary card. So you can have a pretty good hand limit of mercenary cards. If you selected this, it's just a way to ensure that those cards, if you didn't spend them for votes, are still getting you points in the end. And then finally, we have our influence track here again for blue. So you can see there are lots of options and how every game will be unique. As a reminder, there are only 9 of these that are going to score in any given game of Realm of Reckoning. And a lot of times, no matter what you select, you may be giving points to your opponents as well, because they'll of course have some presence on the board. But a lot of the strategy comes down to trying to make and maximize your score while minimizing and deflating the tactics of your opponents. And that, in a nutshell, is everything that you need to know to jump in and have a really good time with Realm of Reckoning. Again, rounds will continue in this where you're drafting cards, clockwise, counterclockwise, clockwise between the rounds. Every time you'll have 3, reckonings, and each of those reckonings will be those bidding rounds where you're going to tally up all of those totals of things that you can bid on in that region, depending on the columns and pillars that are there. Influence of columns that are there, your advisors that match those colors, any troops that you have in that region, as well as any mercenary cards or coins that you want to spend that can be spent in that region. All of that will tabulate up. You'll reveal your bids. Whoever has the highest picks one of those rewards. And that's the really cool thing about Realm of Reckoning, is that this game is, if I had to define it in a word, it would be called choices. This game gives you choices, and not in the intricate sense that some games give you a lot of interesting choices in the mechanics they lay out, but really you determine how this game plays between the choices of what scores in any given game, as well as how you get there. Because just because I won a bid on a reckoning doesn't mean I have to take first place and have to determine what scores. I could give that up for something else that I think is more valuable, or I could literally take a blow to myself, take a few negative points to keep all those resources for something better in the future if I was trying to flush out high bets or high income spends from other opponents. And there's some really interesting choices that allow you to navigate this game and ensure that every game that you play of Realm of Reckoning, with every different group of people that you play it with, is going to be super unique and super different. If you had a very area control averse team or table, this game would look very different than the game I played, where we love area control. And so it was those were on for sure. A team that doesn't want to do take that can do that. There's just a lot of interesting choices, and you have to react to each of them, even the ones that you implement or the ones that your opponents implement, all blend together to make a really interesting tapestry here. And I always love that Ivy does that, right? They take a game, they take a known mechanic, take a known thing, and they add a twist on and a spin and a something into it. Moonrakers, I love Moonrakers, but it's deck building with semi-co-op, right, with negotiation in it. That's cool. That's new. That's unique. Same here. We have this game that it's card drafting and blind bidding with you choosing what scores, and it's such an interesting thing, that element of choice added into this game. Just keeps things really fresh. Like I said, I think that this is, if not, it is tied for my favorite IV Studios game that they've put out. It is really, really solid. So all that to say, I've not looked at final rulebook, but I would say that the teach on this is very simple if you run through it in certain steps. It is card drafting. You get a thing, one of 5 things, I believe, on cards. You tuck it somewhere and get a few other little things. That's it. The real intricacy comes into how you respond and how you plan for what's scoring on the board. It's very, very fun, very engaging. It plays 3 to 5 players, and everything here, just as another shout out, is that pre-model, right, prototype build. This is all going to be tightened up and shored up. I had to put a few stickers on there to change some things they've already updated. So just know that this board is going to look sharp. It's going to have those, the UV flare on it. It's going to look really top tier, as we know a lot of IV Studios games do. They always put out top tier production on everything that they do. They're also going to have metal coins, which are really cool. So stay tuned for those. But if you're interested, if this jumps out at you, if this looks like something that would be fun for your table, and I can say that this stands alone as a very unique entrance into your board game collection, I would encourage you to check out their Kickstarter that's going on the 24th. Be sure to follow along with that and just see all the awesomeness for yourself. If you're watching this later on, I hope that this gave you a good idea of what to expect when you open your box, when you jump in and learn how to play. I promise you guys won't be disappointed with this one. But I want to thank you guys for checking this out and for coming to Meeple Mountain for a board game review. I hope that you'll continue to do that and come to us for all your board game related content and needs. Let us know in the comments what you'd like to see reviewed next. We'll be sure to try to add that into our rotation as we go. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, happy gaming.
Thanks for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out these links to find some other games you might want to bring to the table. This is Tyler Williams, signing off.